Trouble choosing who to keep in your keeper league? Tune in to hear our choices when we drop the puck.
Hunter McDavid, right side scores! Pasternak, Marchand, he'll drag it right in for a chance. Dancing in, Holy mackerel, what a save! Made by Marc-Andre Fleury. Unbelievable by Austin Matthews. A complete turnaround. We're going to Boston, baby!
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Hockey Pucks podcast. I am your host and lead analyst in this episode, Ben Rutledge. Antonio Capos is away for this episode, but he'll be back next week. So there's not been too much news that's happened this week in the NHL. So we decided that we're going to roll out, as our opening segment, we're going to roll out our 2021-2022 standings predictions for each division, playoff winners, and early playoff bracket. So obviously there's still some free agents out there. There still is some players to be signed, moves will still be made, but we figured that we would still just go out as of right now and predict our standings. So without further ado, let's get into it. So for the Atlantic Division, we have in first place winning the division and winning the Eastern Conference, the Tampa Bay Lightning. In second place, we have the Boston Bruins. Third place, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Fourth place and the first wild card, Florida Panthers. Fifth place and eliminated from the playoffs, Montreal Canadiens. Sixth place, Ottawa Senators. 7, Detroit Red Wings. And 8, Buffalo Sabres. We have the Sabres finishing dead last in the league. So takeaways from that, we think that the Lightning will win the Eastern Conference because the Eastern Conference has a lot of good but not great teams. The Lightning, despite losing their entire third line, are still the best team in the Eastern Conference, still a very high-powered team, have all their top 6 skilled players remaining. Didn't lose much on defense, still have Vasilevsky, so they're still going to be a great team. They just lost that depth, which the Leafs lost last year. Colorado lost this year. So you'll see a much closer league, I suspect, this year. In second, we have the Bruins. Now, it seems every year like the Bruins are due to decline. We're not predicting that. We expect that they'll be ready. They'll show up this season and they will be able to maintain what they've kind of been still building since really 2008 or so. In third place, you have the Maple Leafs. Myself being a Leafs fan, it was hard to put them below the Bruins, but I don't see where they're gonna get that far. They lost a lot of depth again. They lost Hyman. Now they're losing in the top 6 after losing the depth. I really think that the cap flattening messed up their plan. Dubas planned on signing his guys, maybe a bit of an overpay, but if the cap were $10 million above what it is right now, which is what it was expected back in 2018 when these guys signed, they'd be in a much different place. Then they're keeping Zach Hyman, they're keeping Kapanen, they're keeping Johnson, and they're rolling out an elite team. But I think I like the moves that the Leafs made. I like the depth signings, kind of throwing as many darts at the dartboard as you will, if you will, excuse me. I think that if Kasha, Bunting, Richie, these guys hit, Nick Robertson comes up and hits, Sandin comes up and hits on the power play, I think that they have potential with their big four to be an elite team like they have been, especially in the regular season, and I think they'll be fine. They'll make the playoffs. It'll just be whether they can continue in the playoffs, and let's hope that this is year they are able to win a round. Now, in fourth place in the wild card, we have the Florida Panthers. They're rolling back a fairly similar team, but they were a great team last year. They figured out their depth. Their depth was cheap and good. They brought in Sam Reinhart, who's an elite top 6 player. They extended Verhaeghe, extended Bennett, extended Duclair, kept all of their guys, extended Montour. They're getting Ekblad back. They got rid of Yandel's contract. They got rid of Stroman's contract. And I just think that really next year they're going to be rolling into it was one of the most elite offenses in the entire National Hockey League. And I think that that's what will propel them. And I think they will struggle in the playoffs, however, with their lack of defense. Now, briefly, we'll cover the rest of the Canadians. They, I just, we don't think that they have enough offense to win in the regular season. They're built for playoff success, but they just don't have enough to make it out of the regular season. Senators and Red Wings should see dramatic improvements, but just not playoff good enough this year. And the Sabres are going to be awful. Moving on to the Metro. Winning the Metro, despite all of their losses, is the Carolina Hurricanes. Looking at this division, there's no great teams. There's just a lot of good teams. The Hurricanes still have all of their offense intact, and it'll really just come down to their goaltending, but we think that that'll be able to maintain, and they will have a good season and win the Metro. And second is the New York Rangers. I think this is finally their year to truly take that final step into the playoffs. They had a terrific rebuild, ton of young prospects. Losing Buchnevich will put a lot more pressure on Lafreniere and Kakko, but I think that especially Lafreniere is up to that task and should be able to jump into that top 6 role that they need to fill the Buchnevich hole. And third, we have the New York Islanders. It's hard not to put these guys in the playoffs. They just seem to win year after year after year, and they're just always there. The Trot system works. As much as it's boring, it works. So we have them in third. And in fourth place, in the second wildcard in the Eastern Conference, the Philadelphia Flyers. We're calling it Carter Hart bounce back season. We're calling a bounce back season from the entire team. Konechny, Couturier should be able to really carry that offense. They added guys like Ryan Ellis, Rasmus Ristolainen. Despite Ristolainen's possible defensive woes, we still believe that he on a better team should see some more stats like you saw 2-3 years ago from him, where he can be that true top 4 defenseman. And if he is, especially adding Ryan Ellis to Ivan Provorov, Radko Gudas, this team should be an elite team. And so that means the Capitals, Penguins, Devils, and Blue Jackets in that order miss the playoffs. The Blue Jackets are going to be awful. The Devils will see improvement, but this division is just too good. The Penguins, losing McCann, losing Tanev, major question marks around Jari, starting to see a true decline in Malkin's game. I just don't think they have enough. They don't have what it takes. And very similar with the Capitals. The Capitals should be better because they do have a bit more that is not declining on that offense, but they still have a ton of question marks, and I think it'll hold them back from the playoffs. Now, in the playoffs for the Eastern Conference, we have the Lightning playing the Flyers, Hurricanes, Panthers, Bruins, Leafs, of course, and Rangers, Islanders. So we have the Tampa Bay Lightning beating the Florida Panthers, Carolina Hurricanes beating Tampa Bay Lightning beating the Philadelphia Flyers, Carolina Hurricanes beating the Florida Panthers, the Toronto Maple Leafs beating the Boston Bruins, finally getting that Game 7 revenge, and the New York Islanders beating the New York Rangers. We then have the Lightning beating the Leafs, the Islanders beating the Hurricanes, and for the third straight year, a Tampa Bay Lightning New York Islanders conference final with Tampa Bay Lightning winning once again. Moving on to the Western Conference, we have in the Pacific Division, first place, Vegas Golden Knights. Second place, Edmonton Oilers. Third place, Vancouver Canucks. No wildcard teams in this division. The Coyotes going to be awful. Sharks going to be awful. Ducks going to be bad, but much better from last season. So those three are no doubters. The Flames we have then in fourth last. Their core is starting to fall apart. There's question marks around. They've made some good moves, such as bringing in Zadorov and bringing in Vladar as a possible backup to Markstrom. They have too many question marks on the offense, and I don't think they have, especially losing Giordano. Their defense is completely depleted from 2 years ago. Hamonic, Giordano, Brody, gone. All of them gone. I just think that it's going to be too hard for this team to hold up. And in just missing the playoffs, we have the Los Angeles Kings. This team's made a ton of improvements. They should be dramatically better. They have a great farm system, arguably the best in hockey coming up. They just right now don't have enough offense after that Kopitar, Arvidsson, Iafallo line. They just won't have enough. And they still have question marks around Cal Pedersen and Jonathan Quick in that. But this team will be much better and should begin to be a perennial playoff team, provided that Byfield and Turcotte and Kaliev take that jump necessary. Now in the Central Division, we have the Avalanche winning, the Jets in second, Blues in third, Wild as the first wild card, and the Stars as the second. We have in this division the Predators in last place, the Kraken in second last, the Blackhawks in third last. Now, the Blackhawks were the one that we were considering putting in the playoffs, but we just don't think that they were good enough before, and even bringing in guys like Seth Jones and getting Kirby Dach fully healthy, Jonathan Tate's fully healthy, bringing in Caleb Jones, bringing in Marc-Andre Fleury. Fleury's old and has a ton of question marks. Seth Jones is overrated as a true defenseman. I don't see a path, especially in this good of a division, for them to make it. Now the Stars, we are calling a bounce back here. Despite them being very old, we think this is really their last chance to make a run. And I see it there with Jason Robertson, Rupe Hintz, Tyler Seguin fully healthy, Jamie Benn, Radulov fully healthy, Heiskanen and Klingberg on defense, And then the duo is suspected to be Braden Holtby and Ben Bishop, leaving Khudobin and Ottinger without a job. Khudobin, they're desperately trying to shop right now as we speak, and Ottinger is just still kind of a young goaltender who will still probably be their future goaltender, but they won't be very good when he's their goaltender. And yeah, there's not much else to cover. So our playoff predictions, we have the Avalanche beating the Stars, Golden Knights beating the Wild. We have the Oilers beating the Canucks and Jets beating the Blues. And then we have the Golden Knights beating the Oilers, Avalanche beating the Jets, Avalanche beating the Golden Knights, and Avalanche beating the Lightning to have the Colorado Avalanche be the 2021-2022 Stanley Cup winners. This is still very early, many moves to come. Injuries obviously will affect this. And speaking of injuries, as I was talking about this, Austin Matthews, it was official. He had surgery on his wrist that was bothering him all season. Still managed to put up 41 goals, might I add. But he's out 6 weeks. This will just affect his camp and preseason games, but I expect at least we'll be able to ramp him back up in those last 2 weeks to be able to be ready for Game 1 of this NHL season. Thank you for listening to the opening segment. Off to the Ozone with Owen.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Ozone. So despite the NHL still being an off-season, there's drama going around in the league that could affect next season. First topic I'd like to cover doesn't directly affect next season, but will affect the season coming after that. For the 2022-2023 season, is that the salary cap has been raised by $1 million. Another thing that doesn't directly affect this season is that Tony Esposito has passed away, 78 years old, 16 years in the league, 15 of those with the Blackhawks. I mean, everyone knows him. He was a pioneer of the butterfly stance, which is extraordinarily popular now. And he was the younger brother of Phil Esposito, a center who also played in the NHL. And over with modern-day news, Kaprizov has joined the Wild camp and is staying in the NHL, which is very good to hear from those Wild fans out there. But something not too great to hear for those Buffalo fans is that Eichel and Buffalo are still in disagreement over his status and how the surgery is being handled. Buffalo's been quoted in saying, if there's a deal out there that we feel is the right thing for the Buffalo Sabres, that we feel will help us improve, we'd be open to it. Adams said, we're not in a position where we feel that we're going to just do something just to do it. That doesn't make any sense. The feud between the Sabres and Eichel continues to escalate since the captain revealed in May something he called a disconnect with the team and how he's been treated with this injury. He said the disagreement was leading him to question his future with the team. Definitely not something the Buffalo fans want to be hearing, but something us Team Canadian fans, which I assume most of these listeners are, want to hear is that John Cooper is now the head coach of Team Canada, and he's the back-to-back Stanley Cup champions, the reigning Stanley Cup champion of both 2020 and 2021, is now the head coach of Team Canada. Certainly a good hire, and he's a veteran coach who could certainly help this team do well. And this has been the Ozone. Thank you guys so much for listening.
Welcome back, everybody, from the Ozone. Thank you, Owen, for that terrific Ozone section. We're going to be moving on now to the fantasy segment of our podcast. So, before we get into the keepers, we have a few signings to cover. So, Neil Pionk extends with the Jets. Jakub Vrana extends with the Red Wings. Carter Hart extends with the Flyers. Comtois extends with the Ducks. Shesterkin with the Rangers. Samsonov with the Capitals. Reinhart with the Panthers. And Shillington with the Flames. So all of this is on our Instagram at Fantasy Hockey Pucks. We have our full in-depth analysis written on there by myself. However, we will still cover it here. So Neil Pionk signed for 5.875, which shows that he's truly their number one defenseman, because you don't pay a guy that type of money if he's not going to be your number one defenseman. He's their guy. He should be number one power play, and I think that to have him as one of your top two defensemen is completely understandable. Next, Jakub Vrana extends 3 years, $5.25 million. This is a great signing for the Red Wings. Bring back a guy who was putting up 2019, 2020 numbers, but on bigger minutes. I expect those points to go up playing with a fully healthy Larkin and Bertuzzi. I just see a true breakout year for the young, up-and-coming Russian winger in Jakub Vrana, and I think that he will become a mainstay on your offense this season if you draft him. And so I think, Vrana's not Russian, he's Czech, my apologies. Next, Carter Hart extends for 3 years at $3.9 million AAV. Like I said earlier, we're calling a Carter Hart bounce back season. I think that you can get him at dramatically lower ADPs than where his final overall position will be. And I think that this is what is being a late round pickup with tremendously high upside. I just think it's too good to pass over. Next, Maxime Comtois extends for 2 years. The Ducks are an up-and-coming team. He does hold some late-round value this season. He did last year. I expect very similar numbers from him. However, for Dynasty is where he really gets interesting. He has terrific potential, and on a team that has the potential to dramatically improve, he is someone that is worth targeting in your Dynasty draft. Next, Shesterkin extends with the Rangers. At 4 years, 5.6 mil. He's the number one goalie. He clearly beat out Georgiev. I drafted him in Dynasty. I think yearly Dynasty is a great goalie. He can be your true number one, and I think there are very little to no question marks surrounding him at this point, and I suspect he'll have a terrific year helping lead that young up-and-coming Rangers core. Next, Samsonov extends 1 year, $2 million. Good signing for Washington. The only problem for his fantasy value is that, like Vanacek, they will be splitting games, possible 60-40 at best for Samsonov. And so I just think that he has to be a third goalie despite his true top two goaltending potential. I just don't think that you can draft him with that game's play downside. I think that drafting him as your third goalie, plug him in when he is starting, it's still very much worth it. Sam Reinhart extends on a massive 3 year, $6.5 million contract. Great signing for the Panthers. I suspect they'll likely go, quote unquote, super line Reinhart, Barkov, Huberdeau, reading right to left there. And I think that Reinhart will put up top 50 numbers this season. playing with Barkov and Huberdeau. Last season, he was the lone bright spot on the Sabres, and I expect now they've paid him like a top line winger, and I expect he'll be on the number one power play on a tremendously high-powered offensive team, and I think that he's great for you to draft. Now, finally, Shillington, minorly fantasy relevant, but it's still worth covering. Shillington extends with the Calgary Flames. He is someone to watch, especially with them losing Giordano too. He does have some offensive upside. There is still Hannafin there, but if he's able to beat out Hannafin for that power play, he does suddenly gain value as your fifth, sixth defenseman. And if he's on that number one power play, he's a must-add. So he's just a watch list for now, but figured we would cover it. All right. Now, so for the keepers, it is totally dependent on how many keepers you have. So in a normal in a 3-keep league, which should be the minimum if you're doing a keeper is 3. The players that I would easily keep, obviously McDavid, Matthews, McKinnon, Draisaitl, Rantanen, Marner, Kucherov, Barkov, Pastrnak, Huberdeau, Makar, Aho, Eichel, Panarin, Landeskog, Fox, Zibanejad, DeBrincat, Gensel, Connor, Scheifele, Marchand, Stone, Point, Ehlers, Pedersen, Crosby, Kane, Hedman, Ovechkin. So that's our top 30. All these rankings are on our website it's a very weird domain. It's in our link tree in our bio of our Instagram. Just go there, press on that. It will be there. You have access to all of our rankings that we post on Instagram. They're also coming out every Monday. Now, those are the easy people. Now, in terms of keeper strategy, in a keep 3, really, you could possibly I would probably keep. It's tough to say because it totally depends on the makeup of your team. Like if you have 3 young studs on offense, you're gonna keep them instead of keeping a guy like a Dougie Hamilton who's a bit older on not as good of a team. Like you're gonna keep your young studs, and I would keep Nylander, Ehlers, Matthews, just using those as an example because we have another small episode coming out on TikTok at Fantasy Hockey Bucks 2021. Go follow us there. We also post tons of fantasy content there. We're starting a new series, on where we go in and we talk about draft strategy for the first 5 rounds at each pick. We'll be covering tons more draft content as the season comes closer, and your draft should start to be happening middle to end of September. But really, the keeper strategy is don't overthink it. This isn't Dynasty. You shouldn't be targeting young. You shouldn't be targeting age over skill. It's keeper. As long as you aren't expecting a major decline next season, you really just keep the skill. So Ovechkin still probably worth the keep. Crosby still probably worth the keep, again, depending on your team. But I ideally would obviously keep your elite first round pick. But if you have a young goalie, and I would include the young goalies Vasilevsky, Hellebuck's not as young, but he's just too good. Vasilevsky, Hellebuck, Shesterkin, Hart, those two especially, depending on their seasons. Saros, Demko. I would possibly think about keeping those guys. This is more in a keep 5, and I think that they could have tons of value. In one of the leagues that we did, Antonio and I did before we started this account, one of the leagues I had both Jordan Binnington and Andrei Vasilevsky, and I kept them both for 2 straight years. I picked up Binnington in that 2019 amazing run that he had at the end of the season and kept him for the next season. And Vasilevsky this was a keep 5. And keeping those two really short up my goaltending. So going into the next draft, while there were runs on goaltenders, you didn't have to touch one. So that's why I think if you're able to find a young stud, think of it more as a dynasty type of approach. take Nedeljkovic, take Saros, take Shesterkin, take Demko, Swayman, depending on his year. Really, those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 goaltenders. Those 5 goaltenders are really what you should be targeting, because target them at your trade deadline. As long as they're in a team that's out, target them, keep them in your top 5. Then you're rolling into every season with hopefully an elite goalie. Should be elite goalies based on their trajectories. And so I think that if you're able to target them, keep them at the end of your season, have them at the end of your season, keep them, that's a terrific strategy for your goaltending. In a keep 3, unless you have Vasilevsky or Hellebuck, you can't keep a goaltender. Unfortunately, you're going to have to go and target one in the draft. But in a keep 5, that's when you take those young guys and you keep them. Now, moving on to defensemen. And again, going back, in major keep leagues, like when you're reaching double digits, then obviously guys like Varlamov, Rask, if he plays this season, Grubauer, Fleury, Leonard, the more Campbell, the older guys, you still keep them, but it's more for the smaller, more difficult decisions around 8 to 5 keepers is where I'm really going to be focusing, because anything shorter than that, it's just your best players. Like you're just like your 3-star players, and anything more than that, it's not too challenging because you're choosing between like a Jared McCann and Sam Bennett, which if you don't keep one of them, it's not too big of a decision, like a league losing decision. Now for defensemen I find are the hardest, because the true best ones are older, other than really Fox and Makar. So Fox and Makar easy keeps no matter what. But the older defensemen, it's tough. If you look at their stats and you're projecting a decline in a keep 5 or keep 6, I'm trying to think of a defenseman off the top of my head who's like that. Hamilton's one of them. Who else? Yossi, Petrangelo, those type of guys who are still good but are getting older. You're starting to possibly see a decline. If you're projecting a decline in a keep 5 and you have Ehlers, Nylander, Matthews, and Hedman, and Alex DeBrincat as those 5, and then you also have Yossi, and you're trying to decide, do I not keep one of those to keep Yossi because Yossi's a defenseman? No, you can't think of it as that. You have to think of it in a shorter keeper league, as you have to keep the skill and you have to keep the main contributors of your points. So that's really what you have to do, is you can't look in totally off stats, can't go totally off age. You really have to combine them all is the best strategy. And so you have to take the way their careers are trajecting. So a player like Ehlers, Nylander, their careers are going up, while someone like Yossi, Petrangelo, theirs are starting to go down. And so really, you'd have to keep the younger, more talented offensive guys. And as much as defensemen can be league winning if you have a great core, it's not worth sacrificing one of those players to keep that elite D core, because you can really rebuild it, especially in a Bangos league. Defensemen become even less valuable in a Bangos league because you can bring in a guy like Jake Muzzin, who doesn't get a ton of points, but will get you hits and a ton of blocks and makes him extremely valuable. So, recapping this all really, for keepers, for goalies, if you, in a keep 3, keep the elite 2. In a keep 5 to 9, target those 5 that I listed: Saros, Nedeljkovic, Swayman, Shesterkin, Hart. Those 6, target those, keep them. For defensemen, you can't think of positional value. You have to think of overall total value. And most of the time you'll end up having to keep the forward over the D. But if people keep the D over the forward, then you're going to be able to run on your D. Or you can just pick your D with the first pick, because there will still be great defensemen who don't get kept. And for forwards, the age is key. And really, unfortunately, for guys like Crosby, for guys like Bergeron, for guys like Kane, Ovechkin, they really only have possibly this keeper season left, and then I'd look to move on as they slowly start to decline. And I think that you also can't treat it too much like dynasty and be like, oh, I've got to keep Nick Robertson because he can be a great player, and lose a guy like that's Andrei Svechnikov. You lose Andrei Svechnikov because you want to keep the prospect in Nick Robertson. It's just not worth it. You have to take the skill. It's only for 1 year. And so you have to, when it comes down to it, the last thing I'll leave you with is you have to take the skill and take the highest point percentage from your team, provided they are young. So don't all go after position. Don't go after anything like that. Just remember that you have to take those people who are providing you points. Don't take someone based off their position unless they're performing much higher than their position. So, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Fantasy Hockey Pucks podcast. I apologize for myself having to run this one solo. We are expecting next week to have a full crew as well as another brand new guest for you all who are listening. And to bring it all to a close, thank you guys for listening. We'll catch you next time on the Fantasy Hockey Pucks podcast when we get into our first mock draft the next time we drop the puck.